So hi everyone, my name is Iti Alpha Kerajala, as I've been introduced, commonly known as Iti. I work at Amazon as an anti-money laundering compliance analyst, and I've had a couple of years in financial services, dealing with a bunch of different things, from handling terrorism claims to obviously now investigating people and businesses for money laundering. So over those years, I've picked up a couple of things, and I'm here to apply them to healthcare and probably give you a different view, a different spin of your considerations of healthcare, particularly when it comes to the African continent. So I'm just going to start. Oh, let's just go to the beginning. I don't know why it started right from the end, but we will start from the beginning. Let's see. All right, cool. So agenda. I'm going to talk you through financial considerations. We'll talk a little bit about, some of the financial crimes that can typically be found in African healthcare systems. We'll discuss the implications of this, what organizations currently exist, what opportunities there are for digital health on the continent, and I'll just summarize everything. And then I think we're going to do question and answers at the end. So if you hear me rushing, it's because I'm trying to keep to time, but I hope we can still have a very good conversation. So when we talk about financial considerations, when I talk about financial considerations, I'm talking about two different kinds of things. The actual financial crime in itself. I've got a definition here by the Financial Conduct Authority here in the UK, which I really like. It defines financial crime as any kind of criminal conduct relating to money or financial services, including offenses like, fraud, misconduct, handling the proceeds of crime, or financing terrorism. So aside from the actual financial crime, which I've just described, you also have illicit financial flows. That's more about the movement of money across different borders, of which these finances are illegal at their source. This is actually chronically experienced in the African continent, because illicit financial flows doesn't necessarily have to even start with where the money is traveling through. But what tends to happen is when money travels through different countries, those countries don't necessarily get the benefits of the money that's passing through in terms of taxation. So lots of African countries actually experience this issue of illicit financial flows. So what's next? We're going to talk a little bit about financial crimes that we can see in African healthcare context. I want to do a little bit of interaction here, though. I want some people to either, preferably speak up or type in the chat what financial crimes come to your mind when you think about financial crime. I'm not expecting anyone to be an expert, obviously, but if you think about financial crime, what comes to your mind? Let me look in the chat. Okay, corruption. Let's see if there's anybody else that's got any ideas of what kind of corruption or what kind of financial crimes exist. Please feel free to type it in or just say it if you think about anything. Give it just a couple more moments to think if there's anyone that can come up with anything. Fraud, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll just probably wait for one more. It could be anything. There's no silly answer, really. It could be anything. When you think of financial crime, money laundering, okay. I've seen someone said money laundering and then saving them in the Cayman Islands. Yes. All right, fab. Thank you for your engagement. What have I got here? Let's see. First thing, bribery. So everyone knows what a bribe is. That's, when you're dishonestly trying to persuade someone by handing them a bit of cash to do things your way. Anyone who's been to the continent would probably know that that's actually very, very prevalent on the continent of Africa. And even in the healthcare context, you sometimes have people bribing their way to be seen first by healthcare practitioners or doctors, or bribing their way to perhaps place their products on the shelves. It takes different forms within healthcare. What's next? Corruption. Somebody already mentioned corruption. Corruption, that typically goes hand in hand with bribery. Bribery is when you are, giving the funds to make things go your way. And corruption could be when you are accepting funds or accepting some kind of favor for the purpose of you, doing something that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily do. That's also commonly found in the healthcare context. We've even got cyber crimes. Cyber crimes affects not just, tech companies. You've got issues of malware, ransomware, data theft, identity theft, things like that. These also affect healthcare organizations. One of the most prevalent ones, particularly, is these days is data theft, where you have organizations, storing KYC, storing, information of their customers, of their clients, and this kind of data being leaked or being stolen and then being used, for ransoms and things like that. That's quite a common occurrence these days as well. What's next? Fraud. Of course, whenever you think of financial crime, fraud is the biggest and it's the first thing that comes to everyone's mind. It is slightly different though, and I've listed it as a slightly different thing to all these other financial crimes that I've listed so far. Again, fraud is about, being dishonest, using dishonesty to try to have an unfair advantage over somebody else. And you can obviously then use bribery, but fraud in itself is also a slightly different financial crime of its own. What else have we got? Human and organ trafficking. I'm very sure some people didn't think about this, but that also does lend itself to financial crime. Of course, it's terrible, really, but you sometimes have people going into healthcare organizations and not walking back out. You've got people who are going in and walking out, but they've got an organ missing, and it ends up in somebody else thousands of miles away. This is also unfortunately very prevalent on the African continent. And it's something that's really trying to be addressed by a number of organizations, not just in Africa, but around the world. But this is also a crime, a predicate crime that leads to financial crime. It goes hand in hand with financial crime. Money laundering. A lot of people think, fraud and money laundering are probably the same thing, but it's actually not. Money laundering is the act of concealing or trying to transform illicit funds to make it appear clean. So if you were an organ trafficker, for example, and you can't just go and put all that money into the bank, you have to clean it somehow so that you don't get questions. And there, you could put that money through a series of transactions, use a couple of Smurfs to, deposit your money into different banks and bring it back together, and maybe then use it to purchase some kind of property to make that fund look clean. That is what money laundering is about. It's about washing and cleaning dirty money through a series of transactions to conceal the origin of the illicit funds. Next, we've got tax abuse. So of course, there's tax avoidance, where people try to, avoid paying the taxes, or organizations themselves try to avoid paying the taxes that they are meant to pay as their fair share towards their society, their communities. That is also a financial crime that you often also see in healthcare, either in individual practitioners and sometimes even in organizations as a whole. What else? Terrorist financing. I hope I'm bringing some things that people have not necessarily considered as financial crimes, but terrorist financing is a huge financial crime that, in fact, the superpowers of the world are fighting terror very strongly against. The thing about terrorist financing is that the finance in itself does not have to have illicit origins. So you can have money coming from a very clean, apparently, or allegedly clean source, but it's the destination of the funds that makes it terrible, obviously, because it's ending up in support of terrorist activities. So there's a difference between, money laundering, where the origins of the funds are dirty and you try to turn it clean. But then on the other hand, you've got terrorist financing, whereby the origins might not necessarily be dirty. It could be very clean, but it ends up for dirty purposes, for dirty gains. That's a very big financial crime that we also find running through the healthcare system, even in Africa, through things like, trade misinvoicing, which I think is my next point here. So trade misinvoicing can be, that's basically, using false information on an invoice, charging for more things when really, maybe charging for more units of whatever equipment when you've actually got less, or saying it costs a lot more than it does. And then obviously the excess funds slip under the radar into someone's direct pockets or goes on to find itself in somebody else's hands, which goes to somebody else's hands, which can then lend to terrorism or whatever else. So that's a financial crime itself. And wildlife trafficking. So when we think about healthcare, it's not even just, in terms of on the human side, we've also got in terms of, animals and wildlife, pets and wildlife as well. A lot of animals get trafficked, and as you must know, that's also a very huge problem in Africa. We have a lot of rare and very precious wildlife that still exists today, but they are sadly being hunted and trafficked out of existence. So that is also a financial crime. So just a side note, while these actions may be considered financial crimes on their own, some of them are not. As I said, some of them are not direct financial crimes, but they often lead to financial benefits, illicit financial benefits, which in the end is a financial crime. And my other side note is that all of these typologies that I've mentioned are not specific to Africa alone. They are not specific to the African healthcare context alone, but they are very prevalent in the African healthcare context. And of course, all these typologies, they show up and they manifest in different ways in different environments, and they affect people differently. So moving on, what's next? We're going to talk about the implications on, the healthcare system in African countries. Firstly, human lives are affected. That is the biggest cost of financial crime, which obviously helps the criminals. But in helping the criminals, you're actually taking away from humans and often leaving humans' lives at risk. I've mentioned organ trafficking before. Bribery and corruption that go hand in hand. I mentioned examples of, placing maybe fake products on shelves or placing more expensive products on shelves through corruption and bribery. You can also have accreditation forgery, which can often lead to death if the medicines are not legitimate, or long-term side effects or dependency abuse on these medications. We've got exploitation. You can have criminals exploiting the healthcare system by creating fraudulent businesses, submitting false claims to insurance. Money could be laundered as well through these fraudulent billing schemes, as I mentioned before. Lack of trust, of course, placing the people that need the healthcare at the center. You often have people who don't actually trust the formal system of health in their countries, due to corruption or due to the scares of their lives or their organs being trafficked or the wildlife being trafficked. People can be very wary of visiting practitioners. I've just written some examples in there of people maybe not wanting to buy medicines because they're too expensive, and maybe those medicines are expensive because they're actually part of the money laundering cycle, where the prices have been hiked because they don't actually want anybody to purchase those items that are probably on virtual shelves. Or even people not wanting to buy these medications because it actually doesn't work. Because as I said, there can be some medicines that have forged accreditation. And you very often see, politicians even traveling abroad for treatment, or anybody who has enough money that lives on the African continent, they're traveling abroad for treatment because they don't even trust their own healthcare system to look after them properly. And this is obviously the consequence of these financial crimes that exist in the healthcare system. What else have we got? We've got risk of sanctions. Human and organ trafficking and wildlife trafficking are big deals. And of course, if these are not addressed, it can lead to sectoral sanctions aimed at the healthcare sector specifically, which can, of course, impact the people who need the healthcare on the ground, or even comprehensive sanctions aimed at all parts of the economy. And then we've got increased healthcare expenditure. So another cost of financial crimes could be, increased costs for treating, drug addicts, or just when things are not happening properly and money is not flowing exactly the way it should be and where it should go to. Of course, it means they obviously have to then spend more money because if there are holes in the system, then more people are going to need even more support. I've written there that key sectors like healthcare could be a lot more efficient if they benefited from just a fraction of the millions of illicit finance that flows through borders on a yearly basis. So what's next? Next, we're just going to talk about what organizations currently exist. So there are many organizations that take place in protecting the integrity of African financial systems, and they differ. Country to country, they differ. Regions to regions, they differ. There are international organizations, there are regional organizations. And there I've got a list. We've got the Eastern and Southern Africa Anti-Money Laundering Group. We've got the Financial Action Task Force in Europe, which basically leads the fight against money laundering, terrorism financing, proliferation financing across the world. They have guidelines and regulations that other FATF-style bodies try to take learnings from and apply to their own context on a risk-based approach. We've got intergovernmental action groups. We've got the IMF. We've got the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and all these other organizations that I've listed. If you want to take a look at any of them, I can share this list afterwards. I'm just rushing through, and I don't have that much time. So now I'm just talking about the opportunities that are available in the healthcare context. You can have AML frameworks in place, even in pharmacies. I think somebody mentioned earlier that, one of the most used areas of healthcare in African countries is the pharmacies. People tend to go to pharmacies first. And if you can have AML frameworks, even in a pharmacy, you're less likely to have where, people in the background like me can be investigating whether there are, signs of money laundering, signs of fraud, or, bribery. You can decrease the risk of these things happening. Another opportunity is cryptocurrency. Somebody else mentioned, African countries. I think Nigeria has one of the highest use of people using the internet in the world, and actually a lot of Nigeria as well is one of the largest countries of cryptocurrency use. And cryptocurrency can assist in so many different ways. One of them being, faster payments. So I know when people think about Africa, they're not necessarily thinking about crypto and wealth and finance, but actually there are a lot of really wealthy people there and a lot of people that have cryptocurrency and can use it. Even if people don't have it on the continent themselves, if they have family members abroad who have cryptocurrencies, they can probably pay for treatment. That could be faster. And of course, as we know, cryptocurrency relies on the blockchain where every transaction is stored on the blockchain. So that can also lead to cutting down the element of surprise and the risk of financial crime. Digitalized record keeping. I think this was mentioned as well, maybe a little bit by Dami. KYC there stands for Know Your Customer. That means data that any organization collects on their customers. So if we can digitalize record keeping, the names, the ailments that people are experiencing, their medications and things like that, you've got less of a chance of there being fiddling of records behind the scenes. And that can obviously also decrease the risk of financial crime. I'm going to try and move as quick as I can. Connecting national IDs to health records. Again, I think everyone can see how that can help to decrease the risk of financial crimes. If your ID is tied to your health record, if something happened to you for whatever reason, wherever you travel to, it would be seen on your record. If you were somebody who had how would I say it? if you wanted to maybe to use somebody for organ trafficking, like that would be better monitored if there's just, you know, as I said, digitalized record keeping, and if there's a link between people's personal IDs and their health records. Virtual interactions, of course, we can have video consultations. This is something we all in the UK probably already, you know, experience, especially from the lockdown that happened not too many years ago. If we have video consultations, if we can use more instant messaging communications, that can help more people to not only have access to healthcare, easy access to healthcare, but it also means there's less chance of maybe like bribery, you know, and corruption and all these financial crimes that can happen in person. And it gives the patients more direct access to their healthcare providers. There can also be robotic logistics. So, for example, things that are maybe predominantly done by non-clinical staff, like, you know, handling deliveries and filing. This can help reduce the risk of things like trade misinvoicing, as I said. So that is also an opportunity for healthcare organizations to take advantage of if they can. So we've talked about what orgs exist, the opportunities, and I'm just going to quickly summarize. When I'm talking about the financial considerations, I'm talking about financial crimes in itself and the illicit financial flows. I've listed a range of typologies. Some of them are, you know, trafficking, we've got tax abuse, we've got cyber crimes. I've talked a little bit about the implications. Of course, the most important thing being human lives being affected, lack of trust, and increased expenditure on the system, on the healthcare system. I've mentioned what kind of opportunities exist, like implementing AML frameworks, even in pharmacies. Talked about using crypto with the benefit of the blockchain. You can get faster payments and you can get benefits from remittances to pay for services. And I've talked about virtual interactions, like using instant messaging to cut out the middleman and having more direct access to practitioners. And then I basically mentioned that, you know, all of these things are experienced outside Africa as well. It's not just specific to the African context, but of course, it shows up and it manifests in different ways around the world. It shows up in its own unique ways in different African countries. And even within Africa, they don't show up in the same way across African countries. So that's it really. If you want to contact me, Iti Barrow on social media.